A few months ago, I set out to complete a prototype build for my RPG Project Bloom. This meant completing all of the game core design systems so I could start honing in on the design issues. For over 4 months, I crafted battle mechanics, designed unit abilities, and wrestled with the UI functionality. Every 2 weeks, I'd have a playtest session to weed out all of the bugs and adjust design choices. But each time, I would always come to the same realization: the game felt off. The game had skill systems, enemy AI, a loot system, and a progression system, but it still felt off. It didn't feel fun. So after every playtest, I'd take some notes and then make changes based on those notes. I'd fix those issues, and after testing again, another list of issues would appear. Before I knew it, I had fallen into a design wormhole, forever lost in its eternal void. Fortunately, I didn't only focus on design, I still made progress on the other core systems. So eventually, after 4 months of work, I had a nearly complete prototype. A few bugs here and there, but I could actually start sharing this with others. I decided to do a few more rounds of playtest, this time having felt like I figured out all of the issues, just to have that depressing feeling hit me again. The game still didn't feel fun. It felt spammy, it felt mindless, and it felt very confusing to follow. But instead of taking notes and building a to-do list like usual, I thought critically about the project, meditated on it, and after some time it finally hit me. The core design choices I made did not blend well with the game I had envisioned. I had a preconceived notion of what my game should be. I wanted a game that felt thoughtful and tactical, but at the same time I wanted real-time elements found in action games. On paper that actually sounds fun, but in practice that leads to an underwhelming experience of both genres. It was this realization that prompted me to make my previous video on the ATB battle systems. But why did it take me so long to realize this? Well, there are a number of reasons, but the biggest one was because I was diagnosing design symptoms, not the problem. Let me explain. Each time I would playtest, I'd inevitably run into an issue, a symptom of the bigger problem. I'd treat the symptom only to have another one emerge, still not recognizing the root cause. For example, the game wasn't as thought-provoking as I wanted it to be, so I'd give enemies new mechanics and the players more tools. But then the game would just feel confusing, like there's too much going on. Units would randomly die to damage over time effects, or an elite enemy would launch a strong attack while you were focused on healing. So I'd react by tweaking some numbers, but nothing really changed. It was kind of like taking a painkiller for a headache caused by dehydration. You're not really targeting the problem. Eventually, I had to face the fact that these symptoms stemmed from a bigger problem. The system mechanics I was building my game around could not coexist with the real-time combat I was forcing into the game. Meaning, I wanted a game that felt thoughtful and a game that rewarded strategy, but the real-time systems prevented players from thinking, causing it to feel spammy, stressful, and confusing. Project Bloom was meant to feel like a mini MMO. You would control the entire party, and each party member had a role to fill, like a tank, healer, or DPS. The tanks had to hold aggro and time defensive cooldowns, and the healer had to keep everyone alive. But doing that for 3 party members in real time was a little overwhelming. I thought improving the game's readability would help, so I moved the UI elements closer to limit where the player's eyes needed to travel, and added artificial pauses between each turn, giving more time for the players to digest the information. These things helped, but none of them tackled the core problem. The complex systems and decision making did not mix with real-time combat. But I couldn't just accept that answer. 2 of my most played genres are MOBAs and MMORPGs, 2 genres that are known for having complex RPG elements. So why is it that my game that had a quarter of the complexity I'm used to handling felt so confusing to play, while MMOs and MOBAs did not? I meditated on this for about a week and found a couple of answers. In MOBAs and MMOs, there are typically ways to mitigate or completely avoid damage, the main source being movement. You can just move out of an AoE or dodge a line shot. But Project Bloom doesn't have movement, you're forced to take damage. Additionally, MMORPGs and MOBAs only ever assign you one role. Your main focus is your primary role assigned to you, be it tank, healer, or DPS. The other players only focus on their respective roles, removing some of the mental stat. But the bigger reason is that these games typically give you a lot of time before ripping off the training wheels. MMOs typically have you doing 50 levels of fetch quest before giving you anything nearly as complicated as a raid. You're eased into your character's role over hours of gameplay. But I'm making an indie roguelike. Players won't wait 20 or even 5 hours before giving an unfiltered opinion. The best you'll get is 1, maybe 2 runs, so I can't front load all of these game mechanics into a real-time combat system. An argument could be made that I could slowly onboard the player over a few runs like many other games do, but I've spent 4 months with my own system and I still find it confusing. So yeah. But even after all of that, the one thing I've always been terrible at is quitting. So where do we go from here? Well, that's where I had to make a choice. I did a fair bit of research, and played some other RPGs. My options were 1. Make AI partners that would help with combat, or 2. Slow down the game significantly. AI partners are a can of worms that I didn't want to touch. We all know how frustrating a game with crappy AI feels, so I went with the latter. I decided to slow down the game, meaning that the game needed to be turn-based. We've come full circle. Back in June, this game was 100% turn-based, but an impulsive idea threw me into a rabbit hole of blending action and turn-based elements, which ultimately fell on its face. Could this idea have worked? Yeah, probably. But I would have had to sacrifice the tactical gameplay and go all in on the action, which was not what I wanted. I had to swallow my pride, lick my wounds, and start overhauling the game back into turn-based, with a small twist. In order to keep some of the time-based elements, I decided to go with Groundia and Child of Light's iteration of turn-based combat. It's a system that separates the time bar into 2 sections, a wait and an action phase. The wait phase is the time that you wait for your turn, and the action phase is the time to actually execute your turn. I feel this system has the perks of having thoughtful turn-based combat, but can still use time-based elements creatively like cast timers and interrupts. The next few weeks will be testing this new combat system, but so far it immediately feels so much more thoughtful and not as spammy. My current balancing approach is to make the game hard as hell and tune it back with playtest. So that's where I'm currently at. There's still a long road ahead, but with each day, we're getting closer to a full release. With that said, if you've enjoyed today's video, please consider leaving a like and subscribing to the channel. Additionally, you can wishlist Project Bloom on Steam. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.